Homelessness in New Zealand surges as housing support falls, data shows. Homelessness in New Zealand is increasing sharply amid declining government housing support and rising economic pressures, according to recent surveys, official figures, and sector reports. New data released in late 2025 show that the number of people living without shelter in Auckland more than doubled between September 2024 and September 2025. Over the same period, central government funding for housing support programs declined, while welfare need and unemployment grew, creating a complex environment of rising housing stress and limited support capacity for those at risk of homelessness. A 6-monthly survey conducted by the Salvation Army and Community Housing Aotearoa under the National Homelessness Data Project, NHDP, found that the number of people sleeping rough or without any form of accommodation in Auckland rose from 426 in September 2024 to 940 by September 2025. This represents an increase of more than 100% over a single year. According to the survey, 14 out of 21 housing support agencies reported increases in homelessness during the period. The NHDP gathers data from frontline service providers, councils, and other agencies to track trends across the region. Sector authorities and local government bodies have voiced concern that official counts may understate the true scale of the increase, noting that many individuals who are transient, couch surfing, or living in informal arrangements are not fully captured in official tallies. Over the same period, government spending on housing support fell significantly. Funding reduced from $655 million in the previous year to around $577 million in the year to June 2026. This drop includes a sharp decline in emergency housing grants, with the amount spent on emergency housing dropping substantially compared to the previous year. Official data from the Ministry for Social Development show that emergency housing grants awarded decreased from around $23 million in April 2024 to just over $3 million by September 2025, a plummet of nearly $20 million in a year. Supporters of increased funding argue that fewer grants available prematurely push vulnerable households back into homelessness or precarious living conditions. Associate Housing Minister Toma Pataka has defended the drop in emergency housing spending, stating that emergency housing should be a last resort and that government resources are being refocused on longer-term housing solutions. However, critics contend that the reduction in immediate support has exacerbated hardship for people already struggling to secure stable housing. Compounding the housing support challenges, official figures indicate an increase in unemployment and welfare reliance. The unemployment rate reached 5.3% in the September quarter, equivalent to about 160,000 people, according to the centrist summary of official data. At the same time, more than 410,000 people, almost 13% of the working-age population, were receiving main welfare benefits, an increase of about 19,000 compared to the previous year. Welfare advocates argue that growing unemployment and benefit reliance add pressure to housing demand among low-income families and individuals, increasing the risk of homelessness when support mechanisms are either unavailable or insufficient. The trend in Auckland reflects broader signals across New Zealand. National data compiled from census and service agencies show rising rates of severe housing deprivation, a category that includes people sleeping rough, living in cars, garages, or overcrowded and uninhabitable conditions. According to the 2023 census and estimates released by sector groups, the total number of people experiencing such severe housing deprivation in New Zealand stood at more than 112,000, representing a notable rise from previous census counts. A July 2025 Salvation Army report found that in addition to homelessness rising across urban centers, the crisis is spreading beyond central city cores into suburban and regional areas. Among those experiencing severe housing deprivation, nearly half were under the age of 25, with Maori and Pacific peoples disproportionately represented. Women, older adults, and youth were highlighted as particularly at risk. National figures also indicated that 1 in every 1,000 New Zealanders was without shelter at the time of a mid-2025 survey, with tens of thousands more living in uninhabitable or insecure housing arrangements. This research found increased homelessness in nearly every community, with no areas reporting declines. Auckland Council's Community Committee has repeatedly expressed alarm at the rising numbers. Committee reports noted a 53% increase in people known to be sleeping rough in the Auckland region between September 2024 and January 2025, and raised questions about the sharp decline in emergency housing listings. Councillors have called for greater transparency on who is leaving the emergency housing system and where people are going. In July 2025, Auckland Council shared figures showing up to a 90% increase in homelessness compared with the previous year, with council and community partners coordinating outreach responses across agencies. The council has committed additional funding within its long-term plan to support homelessness initiatives, while emphasizing that regional efforts cannot address the crisis alone without substantial central government cooperation. The rise in homelessness has sparked debate over the effectiveness and direction of government housing policy. Housing Minister Chris Bishop has acknowledged that homelessness remains a pressing problem. The government cites spending of more than $5 billion annually on housing support programs, including social housing, transitional housing, emergency housing, and the Housing First initiative, while highlighting the difficulty of obtaining precise measurements of homeless populations. However, housing advocates argue that the current policy settings and cuts to specific forms of assistance have undermined access to immediate shelter and long-term stability for at-risk populations. They point to rising declines in emergency housing application approvals and argue that stringent eligibility assessments leave many without recourse to support. Critics also note that broad national strategies and short-term funding injections, such as a $17 million package announced for additional Housing First places and outreach support, fall short of meeting the scale of need. They call for sustained, long-term investment in wraparound services that address interrelated challenges such as mental health, addiction, and poverty. Beyond the raw numbers, the human impact of rising homelessness is evident in frontline service experiences. Support workers report increased mental distress among clients, with many people facing complex barriers to securing safe, stable housing. Children and teenagers experiencing homelessness have been highlighted in specific youth-focused research, with a high proportion of young people among those living without secure accommodation. Economic commentators have also pointed to the broader costs of homelessness, including impacts on local retail spending and urban economic activity, although comprehensive economic analysis remains limited. Sector stakeholders consistently emphasize that the moral and social costs of homelessness are profound for individuals, families, and communities. With homelessness increasing on multiple fronts, key stakeholders, including local and central government, community agencies, and advocacy groups, are calling for more coordinated responses. Proposals include greater investment in social housing, expanded eligibility for emergency support, and integrated models that combine housing with health and social services. The government's Homelessness Insights reports, published twice yearly, aim to enhance understanding of the issue and inform policy action. The June 2025 iteration focused particularly on those living without shelter, employing quantitative and qualitative data to shed light on trends and service responses across Aotearoa. As New Zealand heads into 2026, policymakers face urgent decisions about balancing short-term support with long-term housing solutions amidst persistent economic pressures. With homelessness rising and housing support budgets constrained, the coming months are likely to see continued scrutiny of both government strategy and sector responses.